Hello guys, we have some huge major updates and changes that have just been released and patched in Long Fallen Dynasty, including buffed drop rates for all 5-star gear and gray set gear, as well as a bunch of quality of life changes and some other major update features that we're going to show in this video today. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video, and I'm going to make sure to go over all the changes, especially drop rate changes, because there are some major ones that were made, giving us much better chances at gear here. So some of the additional features at first that they've added for all platforms are a bunch of different camera changes. So they've added a bunch of different settings here to automatically switch between locked on targets and some other camera options, making it easier to switch between targets now than it previously was. Before, you know, if you tried to actually in a fight go between people, you'd have to just kind of cycle through them. Now there are actual settings within the game settings. So now there are more settings for things like this. So switch locked on target to nearest enemy. This will start disabled. You can switch this to right stick down. So as soon as you press that, it will put you on the closest enemy, which is great because you don't have to cycle through 4 or 5 different enemies over and over and over again. This will just put you on the closest one, as well as switching locked on target after deflecting a critical blow, meaning if you deflect a critical blow from an enemy, you can then swap onto them fairly easily instead of then deflecting it and then getting stuck on some other little enemy that doesn't matter. Especially considering, you know, that's when fatal strikes happen, and then you can't get over to the target in time to actually do a fatal strike because you're too busy swapping camera angles. So those are solid buffs, and they added options for setting the rotation and tracking speed for the camera and some other changes regarding that. Some of the big changes now, they modified the reinforcements menu to show warriors who have sworn oaths with the players but are not currently available as companions, and they made it possible to gift cups of cordiality. Now, this is a big change, and I believe the way the game was prior, you could actually go into your battle flag, but in the hidden village, your reinforcements tab was grayed out. So when you went into an actual mission, you would have to go into a mission that actually had that hero available in order to actually give them cups of cordiality and get their set, and you would have to cycle through different battlefields to do so. Now in the hidden village, you can go in here, you can see all the heroes that you have and all the ones that also you do not have. Now, just so happens I believe I have all of them unlocked, and this is going to be a much easier way. That way you can cycle through and get sets for these guys without actually having to go to different battlefields over and over and over and over and over again. So it makes this a lot easier to collect all the sets from reinforcements. So that is a very positive update. The game now allows players to part ways with companions by selecting a current companion in the reinforcements menu rather than using a willow branch. So if you want to part ways with a companion, you can just go in your battle flag and select them and don't actually have to use a willow branch. You get so many of these, it doesn't really matter. But now it's not going to cost you one if you want to part ways with them. They also made changes so that the sort order for the following menus are saved. All of these, the equipment, inventory, status, set wizardry spells, battle set, and all menus available at the blacksmith. Before, this was kind of an issue because every time you went into your inventory, you would go in here and you would notice that when sorting through your gear, you can obviously sort it by rarity type, and I usually always sort it by rarity. If you were to back out and jump back in, it would put you probably on some other sort item or like upgrade level or something. Now this will save for all your menus, so if you do it by rarity and you back out and go back into your inventory, all of that stuff will saved being sorted that way, and this goes individually for each menu option that you have. So they've added an interface allowing players to compare equipment in the equipment menu, and further expansions will be made for that interface, such as support for set bonus lists, status menu, etc. They made changes to the equipment menu so that players may now check and select equipment to favorites. And now it's much easier to set a lot of gear as favorites than it previously was. Another huge update is they made changes to the travel menu. It'll allow the player to check their progress in collecting all of these items, including Shih Tzu, golden cicada shells, tablets, dragon vein essence, dragon vein crystals, and dragon vein crystals via icons. So this means that now when you go into the menus, you can actually see all of the actual progress for items that you've collected. So each level will have all of the icons in the bottom left hand corner for these special items, and a lot of them are healing based items and other things. So these are definitely things you want to go and collect. And now you can actually see the progress and track the progress to know which ones you need to go back to get dragon vein essence or dragon vein crystals, etc. Because especially things like the healing items give you a very big advantage in the game. So you want to go back and collect as many of these items as possible. They've also added check marks, as you could see, to the completed missions in the travel menu. They've also added some design changes and captions for controls to make it easier to distinguish between the inventory and storehouse menus at the blacksmith. That was always kind of a little confusing. They added a dedicated icon that is shown when automatically restocking arrows, projectiles, and consumable items, and added warnings to notify players when their equipment ratio exceeds 100. Now for the biggest adjustment by far, they made the following adjustments to drop rates. So before, drop rates definitely sucked and they were definitely pretty bad. So what they did was increase the drop rates of items with higher rarities after defeating bosses in main battlefields, which is how it should be. If you defeat a boss in a main battlefield, you should almost be guaranteed some sort of 5-star gear or some sort of grace gear. So we increased the drop rate for those overall, and hopefully that will give us a lot more gear to work with. It increased the drop rate of items with higher rarities after defeating sub-battlefield bosses in duels. So they are, again, listening to us. As we beat sub-battlefield bosses in duels, we're going to get higher rarities, more 5-star gear, more grace gear. This is actually very, very positive. Increase the drop rate of items with higher rarities, again, after defeating other players in invade sessions. This is a huge update and adjustment. That way it actually gives you the want to go in and invade other players. So that way, hopefully we'll see more players actively playing PvP and invading other people, because you're hopefully now going to get more 5-star gear and grace sets off of invading other players. Because before, it was effectively not even worth it to go invade players. They've made adjustments so that items for treasure chests containing equipment will incur random loots only when opening them for the second time onwards. And starting from the second playthrough, such items, while having higher upgrade levels, are also more likely to be of higher rarities. So again, another buff and adjustment to higher rarities when you're playing in New Game Plus, which is perfect because that's literally what we need. Like, that's the one change that we needed made, and they changed it. So we'll be testing that over the next couple days. They made adjustments so that items with higher rarities are more likely to be dropped after the player defeats enemies with higher morale ranks than the player's current morale rank. Meaning the higher morale rank above you certain players or certain bosses are, you have a higher chance of gaining a higher rarity item or a higher piece of 5-star gear or grace set item from that actual enemy. They adjusted the lock-on target selection criteria to avoid prioritizing enemies farther away from the player, even when there are other enemies nearby. This was always a problem, but because as enemies were attacking you, it would prioritize somebody completely in the back, and they would just walk up and smack you because they're standing right next to you and you have to cycle through like 4 different enemies, so that's good. Improve situations in the game which occasionally failed to automatically switch to a new locked on target after the player defeated an enemy. They changed their interaction command for burial flags to the down arrow key or down on the directional pad. This is actually a really great change and one that I didn't even realize I needed. And as most of you know that play, sometimes you'll go to loot an item or pick an item up and you'll actually interact with the burial flag, which was kind of annoying because then an enemy would just walk up and obliterate you into pieces and there's nothing you could do about it to get out of the animation. So that's a great change. So one of the bigger updates also is they made some adjustments to the level of difficulty for the battle against Zhang Liang in the main battlefield village of Calamity, including the following. They decreased the maximum HP of its first form, adjusted each type of damage, adjusted the AI, and adjusted the camera movement during airborne attacks. They also added a tutorial to the battle for the first boss fight in this mission. So this is great because this is going to bring us hopefully more players and possibly bring back old players that couldn't get past the first boss, because literally some people had problems with it and just couldn't defeat it, so a large majority of people quit, right? So hopefully this will bring back a lot of players and make the game a little bit easier for some of those players that had a very tough time with this first boss, because a lot of people complained of the difficulty of the first boss and then once they beat him just flew through the entire rest of the game. So they made adjustments so that the Divine Beast attacks are affected by the player's morale rank, meaning if your morale rank is higher, your Divine Beast adjusts accordingly, which is how that should really work, so that's great. Extended the duration of Invincibility after performing Fatal Strikes or Deflect in response to critical blows, as the effects of Invincibility wore off before players regained control. And this is something I noticed while playing, is after you did a Fatal Strike or something, an enemy could just smack you within a certain time frame and there's nothing you could do because you couldn't move or anything like that. So that's a positive change. Made changes to photograph mode. Great, so all of you can take selfies. And made changes so that the revenge is not overwritten when players are defeated by the target of revenge. So this change will prevent the loss of genuine chi when awaiting aid or when given aid repeatedly after being defeated by the same enemy. There's also a large list of bugs here that they did fix, as well as the additional features added here. And overall, one of the bigger changes while we test the drop rates over the next day or two, regardless of the original state of the game and the PC port, Long Fallen Dynasty has been a super fun game. And as you can see, Team Ninja is taking this seriously and making the patching changes that the community and that we want. And so far, I have zero complaints. Every time we brought up a problem so far, I think that they've patched that problem and they're working toward a much better game here. So make sure you guys scroll down and subscribe and like the video if these changes were good for the game. And check out one of these Long videos here on the right. Thank you guys.